Paperclip Murders, Chapter 12, The Old Flying Punch Routine. It occurs to me here that my revelations about clown fear may be somewhat confusing. While I'd rather not get into the details, let's just say that my sordid and colorful past involved terror from a clown with a nose, and leave it at that. Hey, some people are afraid of spinach. Allow me my own personal demons. Say, ladies and gents, I bet you can't tell me what day it is right now, can you? Don't worry, I couldn't tell you either, but it'll come to me. So the day after I got south of Stravinsky, I was down at the morgue trying to chat up Albertson for any more info on the case. Chief Coroner Donald Albertson was an unfriendly, humorless scarecrow of a man who looked like they'd invented him before there was stuff. He had a creepy habit of talking out the side of his thin-lipped mouth, almost like he was giving secret information to an invisible person at his side, and he would frequently trail off and just glower at you. I often wondered if he was practicing to be a gargoyle in his off hours. So, Albertson, would you say that it was foul play that killed Hennessy? I asked him over my shoulder, absently fumbling with a knick-knack on one of his office shelves. Albertson whispered something that sounded like, "Peach Japanese gravy, train a bone." And I turned back to him with a puzzled expression, and pulled the cigarette out of my mouth briskly for effect. "Come again?" I said, and he murmured, "Please just leave the shelves alone." I sat back down across from his desk, him behind it looking like some wraithly general about to issue commands from his armored bunker. "So give me something to work with here, Albertson," I started, and he raised a hand slowly to stop me. His eyes glared out at me. "Just stop talking, Gray. I know what you want, and I have a strict policy, which you well know. I don't give info to private dicks." His wrinkly lips wrinkled up even more at that, like he was spitting out unpleasant things from his mouth. "Information goes to the police. They deal with it because they are the law. You are not the law. You're a charlatan." I had a mind to stop him dead in his tracks by uttering, "Yeah, a charlatan of justice," but then immediately realized how utterly ridiculous that would sound. Albertson was always next to impossible to pry any information out of. That's why I had to go to his fellow employees to get the scoop most of the time. "Well, at least tell me if he ingested something that made him decide to go waiting upside down. In his drink, perhaps. A sandwich." The Honorable Chief Coroner slowly rose to his feet, fingers twitching, and pointed at the door. "Get out," was all he said. I sighed, tugged my hat down on my head, and made a beeline for the exit. Once outside the morgue, I was greeted with the first blusters of a rainy afternoon, and I decided now might be a good time to get a hot cup of soup at the Tea Leaf. It wasn't too far from there, actually, so I turned up my coat collar and decided to flat-foot it for a bit. I couldn't think straight when driving a car anyway, and this was the prime time for using the gray bits. Across the street, passing Lander's barbershop, the red and white pole spinning happily along and nodded at him through the window. Then past that, Mary's department store, and the old ice cream parlor. I wasn't really paying attention, though, as the shops and the pedestrians blurred by. My mind was on Hennessy, and Brock, and Woodchuck. I didn't much like the thought of vindicating the first two, but I reminded myself that it wasn't really vindication. After all, they were dead, and they probably deserved it. But Woodchuck, well, now that I thought about it, I hadn't really asked him about them after this whole ugly mess was discovered, had I? What if Woodchuck were involved? But he seemed too sugary to be like that. The man had displayed far too much music. What was that about sugary music? My senses snapped together like a steam-powered Lincoln log set, and my ears reported that I was hearing that same sick carnival music from the day before. My eyes cast about for the source of Hell's ice cream truck, and when I spotted it, 2 blocks ahead of me, it had just rounded the bend and was pulling over to a group of street urchins on the sidewalk. My body weaponized itself into the locomotive of justice that it could become as I bolted down the street, hands starting to fumble for my trusty sidearm, my eyes fixed on the arm that was currently handing out dollops of ice cream on little cone wafers out of the side of the truck, and the earth exploded. Well, the earth didn't explode, really. It was more like my head. And not that it exploded, really. It was more like the moon had crashed into the planet that was my skull. And by crashed and moon, it was actually more like a wrecking ball of a fist that had connected with the side of my face. Stars were sailing by me with wild grins, waving pom-poms as the street and the buildings and all of my surroundings took on a faded hue and drained themselves of color, slipping slideways like the funny papers. My legs had gone all rubbery as I was steamrolled into the alley I'd almost passed, and I caught a glimpse of something angry and Russian behind the gargantuan knuckles, and then the old flying punch routine knocked me for another loop. And I remembered what day it was. 1, 2, 3 days later. Payday for the Russians, and possible experimentation with my bone structure. A couple of swift kicks to my ribs, and I was wheezing like a deflating balloon, gasping into a cardboard box while something stood above me with his teeth all shiny, like an advertisement for Colgate. "We take what you have now and come back for more later, eh?" he growled, and I held up a weak hand with my wallet in it, still trying to regain my breath. The wallet left, and a moment later flopped down in front of me like a dead bird, spewing cards and scribbled notes. Something snickered, said, "Boss wants you to remember he's generous," and kicked me one final time. Then he left, and I surged bravely to my feet and staggered to the mouth of the alley, my ribs screaming at me in pain like an accordion on fire. My worst fears realized. The spot where the ice cream truck had been was as empty as the Chicago Cubs' chance of winning the Super Bowl. Later, I nursed my bruised ribs and swollen jaw with an ice pack in the safety of my quiet little slice of pseudo-purgatory, i.e. my office, and thought about where things had taken me thus far. The Russian loan shark, Yurov, had loaned me a sizable sum of money back when I first wanted to get my little detective business off the duster, and I had taken it, thinking that it wouldn't be hard to pay him back. Besides, I was no slouch when it came to fisticuffs, and I'd considered the loan to be a simple step in the process of serving justice pie to the needy. But Yurov had put some extra interest on the payments after I'd missed the first one, and lately he'd been asking for things a lot harder than before. Maybe he had to step up in the world to show everyone who was boss. Either way, something had to be done on the payola front, and soon. I picked up the blag, dialed the number for Woodchuck's office, and when the click told me the receptionist had lifted the receiver, I barked into the phone. "This is Carrington Gray. Get me an appointment with Woodchuck, immediately."